Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Yoma, Daf Kaf Hey, and as well Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph. We'll be finishing tonight in Yirtzeh Hashem at the Mishnah on the top of Kaf Vav Amud Beis. Just a reminder that this coming Monday night there will be no shiur in person. We will overlearn on Sunday and overlearn on Tuesday. There will be no shiur at all on Monday night, as I will be out of town at an engagement in New York. So we are starting now on the bottom at a speaking engagement in New York. The Gemara begins at the bottom of Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis, 6 lines from the bottom, and the Gemara wants to know the following. We've been discussing the pious, the lottery. The question that the Gemara wants to know is, when they were doing the pious, did the Kohanim who were in the room have to wear big day kahuna, or could they even wear big day chol? And that's how the Gemara opens here with the question, 6 lines from the bottom. Chav Daled Amud Beis, b'ma mefaisin, what clothing were they wearing? That's a machlokes in the Amoraim. Rav Nachman Amar big day chol, they were wearing weekday clothes. For Rav Sheshes Amar big day kodesh, they were wearing Kohen clothing. They were wearing the arba begadim. Rav Nachman Amar big day chol, it must be that they were wearing weekday clothes. Why must it be that they were wearing big day chol during the pious? The reason why, says the Gemara, is because the Iyamris big day kodesh, had it been that everyone there was wearing big day kodesh, then ika ba'alei zeros, there were people who had big muscles, they were big strong people, decham seva avde, and they're not going to wait for their turn to get picked. They're going to grab they're just going to run in and do the avoda. It's an unbelievable thing. So where's the basic ABCs and midos? Excuse me, please, and thank you. Nothing. The Gemara says that was not the way things were working. Maybe we should assume it was second base and mikdash versus first, unclear. But nevertheless, the Gemara says that it must be that they did the pious, they did the lotteries when they were wearing weekday clothes, because otherwise those who were, called the alam gavar, like from the beginning of Maseches Bava Metzia, and there the Gemara says whoever stronger wins, but here in a non-halachic way, that's the case as well. Rav Sheshes Amar, 3 lines from the bottom, it must be that they were wearing the big day kodesh. Why must it be that they were wearing big day kodesh? The Amers the big day chol, because if you want to say that they were wearing weekday clothes, Agav chavivuse mikru v'avde. It might be that out of tremendous passion to do the avoda, they would run in and do it. So we had to make sure that they were in the appropriate clothing, because if a kohen does his avoda without the appropriate clothing, they're chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, which is a big deal. So that's the machlokes here. It's almost like looking at the content of their character. Do we assume that the big guys are going to try and win, and therefore it must be that they're in big day chol, or do we assume that they're big tzaddikim and therefore they must be in big day kodesh? Subject to a machlokas. We're going to now learn the underbelly of each of these shitas in order to gain some clarity, and that will take us almost until the Mishnah. One other small sugya before we get to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom, Chav Daled Amud Beis. Amar Rav Nachman mina aminullah. Rav Nachman, who is of the opinion that the Kohanim were wearing big day chol, weekday clothes during the pious, during the lotteries. What is his mari makom? Ditnan, the Mishnah writes. Once this person was chosen, who is this person? That's what the Gemara is going to discuss. We don't know who this person is, but once this person is chosen, they would make him change his clothes. And when they were helping him change, they always made sure to leave on the michnasayim, the pair of pants that he was wearing. So says the Gemara at the top of Chaf Hey Amud Aleph, my lab, when this Mishnah is saying that a person was changing his clothes, wasn't it talking about Ba'osin Shezachu L'Payis, that it was talking about the ones who actually won the lottery? And therefore, it must be that they're doing big day chol, because we know that the michnasayim have to come first. And here we see the michnasayim were left on. The Haraya must be wearing weekday clothes. Says the Gemara, Amar of Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, Amar of Sheshes Lo. That's not correct. Be'osan shelo zachu l'payis. When the Mishnah says that people were changing their clothes, the Mishnah at the bottom of Chav Daled Amud Beis of Masrin Lechazanim, that Mishnah was not talking about those who won the lottery. It was everybody else, and it was those be'osan shelo zachu l'payis, the people who did not win, and therefore there's no raya as to whether or not they wore big day kodesh or not. And in fact, says the Gemara as follows. Hachinami mistabra. Sorry, 3 lines down. Hachinami mistabra. This shita makes sense to say that this Mishnah at the bottom of Chav Daled Amud Beis is talking about those who were changing their clothes who did not win the lottery. Hachinami mistabra. If you want to say that the Mishnah at the bottom of the Amud was saying that it was written about those who won the pious, how could you say that the garment that was remaining was michnasayim v'atanya? Minayin shelo yehi davar kodem lemichnasayim. How do we know that the first of the 4 begadim that's put on the body is the michnasayim? Tamalomar michnasei vayu al bisaro. So we see that it has to be, therefore, that this Mishnah must be talking about those who were lo zachu l'pais. The idach, what does the other shita say? Because the Gemara first presented the top line that says, "My lavsha osan shezachu l'pais." Says the Gemara, "Idach, how would he answer that question?" No, lo kasha. You could rework the Mishnah as follows: Hachik tani. Maybe the Mishnah on the bottom reads as follows. The person who the Mishnah is talking about is the one who really won the lottery. While he still has most of his clothes on, he changes first into the pants. So he's wearing, let's say he has a shirt and pants on. He's wearing a weekday shirt and weekday pants. With his shirt on, he's covered, he's dressed. He removes the pants, his weekday pants, and he puts on the michnasayim. Now he put on the avoda pants first, right? The first garment of the 4 garments. So that's what the Gemara says. While he's still wearing his regular weekday clothes, malbishin osan michnasei kodesh. Then he first puts on the pants of the kodesh, and then then they would remove the rest of his clothing and he'd only be wearing pants, which was the first of the 4 begadim that he just put on. So there's a way to rework the first Mishnah. So basically, in short, the Gemara tries to present an argument to support the Shita of Rav Nachman, and in short, the Gemara highlights that it's really not the best argument ever, because we have a way to work around it. If that Mishnah at the bottom of Chav Daled Amud Beis is going to be your beautiful Mari Makom, Rav Nachman, you're going to have a problem, because it's not such an excellent Mari Makom. Then the Gemara pivots to Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was of the opinion that he wore Big Day Kodesh. 8, 9, 10 lines down, Chav Hamad Aleph says the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes, Mina Aminala. From where do I know, says Rav Sheshes, that really the people who were standing around during the Pais were wearing Big Day Kodesh? How do I know? Says the Gemara Tanya. Lishkas Hagazit. The Lishkas Hagazit was where the Sanhedrin used to sit. Kimin Bisilki Gedola Haisa. Bisilki. Basilica? Sound familiar? I presume it's the same word. Does anyone have an art scroll? I didn't look this up. Yeah. Is it called a basilica? It's probably the same exact language. Yeah. So it says, the Rashi here gives an explanation as well. Rashi's 8, 9, 10 lines down, Dibur Maschel Basilki. Rashi says, Beis Gavoa She'al Aliyah. It's a very high place, seemingly that's a lofted place. So anyways, the word basilki, I didn't know this until I learned this daf, that this word is found in Shas. I always thought it was like specifically associated with like Christian buildings, but it's not. The Lishkas HaGazis was referred to as a basilki. Anyways, the Lishkas HaGazis was Kimin Basilki Gdola Hais, a very large room. And this is where they did the payis. Payis b'mizracha. The payis was done on the eastern side of that room. The zakein yoshev b'ma'arava. And there was a zakein, an older person. We'll see soon that this person was not a kohen. That there was a person who was sitting in that room on the western side. The kohanim ukafin v'omnin kimin b'chuliar. They were all sitting in a semicircle type of shape. The hamamun. What? I don't even know what that means. Do you know what that means? Oh. Okay. So Rashi says, Rashi some kind of circle. Anyways, Ramamuna above and notel mitznefes me roshal shal echad mehen the yodin shemimenu payis maschil. So what they would do is he would take the mitznefes, which is the wrap that was around the Kohen's head. He would take it off from one person. That would be where they would start the payis from. They'd count the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, now we don't count people, whatever it was, and that's how they would figure out who was who. The Isal Kadaitach, 1/3 of the way down on Chafam and all. The Isal Kadaitach b'big dechol. Now here's where Rav Sheshes gets into the meat of his argument. If you want to say that really when we were doing the payis they were wearing big dechol, we have a problem. Mitznefes b'big dechol mi'ika. This Mishnah specifically said that the way we start is by removing a mitznefes. But the mitznefes is one of the big day kahuna. So if you want to say that it's big day chol, how can you say it's big day chol if we start by removing a mitznefes? Answers the Gemara, Mi'ika, yeah. Is there such a scenario where someone wears the mitznefes during the week? Answers the Gemara, yes, there is. Kidetani Rav Yehuda v'Yitamer Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Kohen Shasas Alo Imo Ketones Oved Ba Avodas Yachid. You can't do it for the seaboard, but if his mother knitted him a special garment, he's allowed to wear it. So therefore, it could be that he would wear something that isn't mitznefes. It's something that looks like a beged for that's kodesh. So the Gemara rejects that as well. So we'll pause right here halfway down. The Gemara presented this machlokes. What does the Kohen wear during the payis? Is it like Rav Sheshes that he's wearing the 4 begadim, or is it like Rav Nachman that he's wearing weekday clothes? And each one tries to bring their own rationale, and neither of them are stark. Neither of them really hold up to the test of integrity, and the Gemara doesn't really have a strong conclusion here, other than to say that the Rambam does paskin like Rav Sheshes. The Rambam, if you looked at the bottom on Chav Daled and Beis where we started, you'll see that there's an os katan Beis, 5 lines from the bottom by the words Big Day Kodesh, which is where the Rambam indicates that we seem to hold like Rav Sheshes. Please God, we'll find out soon what really happened. It'd be amazing. Anyways, the Gemara here continues by making a tangential point related to the argument of Rav Sheshes. What did Rav Sheshes say? He said that the reason why we know that it's Big Day Kodesh, that the Kohanim wore Big Day Kodesh during the lottery, is because they were in the Lishkas Hagazis in this particular room. It says the Gemara as follows: Amar Abaye, Shma Mina. What do we learn from the presentation of Rav Sheshes? Shma Mina, we learn two things. Number one, Lishkas Hagazis Chetzia B'Kodesh v'Chetzia B'Chol. The room was half positioned in the holy part inside the Mikdash, v'Chetzia B'Chol, and half of it was outside the Mikdash. Number one. And number two, Shma Mina Shnei Psachim Hayula, that there were really two entrances. Echad pasuach bakodesh, one opened into the holy side, echad pasuach bachol, and one of them was opened to a non-holy side. So if you could just imagine a layout like this. Let's say that my Gemara is the larger area of the Mikdash. The Lishkas HaGazis would sit on the border like this, half in and half out. This part is on the outside, and this part is going to be on the inside. And there was a door from within the holy to get to the Lishkas HaGazis, and a door from the north, from the outside as well, to get in. And the Gemara is going to articulate how each of these things were drawn out from the statements of Rav Sheshes. Let's continue in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, the Salka Daitach, a little bit more than halfway down, almost exactly halfway down. The Salka Daitach, Kula Bakodesh. If you want to argue, if you wanted to say that really the Lishkas HaGazis was fully consumed within the Kodesh area, that's not possible. What did the Brisa say above about the Zakein? It said that the Zakein was Yoshev b'Ma'arava, that he sat on the western wall of the Lishkas HaGazis. That's impossible. V'ha'amar mar ein yeshiva ba'azar el l'malchei beis David bilvad. No matter who he is, unless he's Malchus Beis David, you're not allowed to sit in that space. It's Kodesh. So it must be that there was a part of the Lishkas HaGazis that was in Chol. Because otherwise, how could the Mishnah say that he was sitting? So that's proof number one. On the other side, if you want to say that it was all Chol, then we have another problem. If you want to say the Lishkas HaGazis was all external to the Azara in a non-holy space, that's impossible. Payes b'mizracha. How could we then have the payes in a non-holy place? V'haba'inan, as we learned yesterday, to fulfill the pasuk b'veis Elokim nahalech b'ragesh v'leika. We need to fulfill the fact that the Beis Elokim is Kodesh inside. That's where we need to have the ragesh, the exciting feelings of the payes, of the lottery, the haraya that the Lishkas HaGazis can't totally be immersed and subsumed in the chol. It must be that it's part Kodesh and part chol. And the Brisa was dichotomous. It showed us both features. It showed us that the payes was in the Mizrach, which had to be Beis Elokim in the Kodesh. And it showed us that there was a Zaken who was Yoshev b'Ma'arava, which has to be chol. So that's how the Gemara presents that part of the argument. And 2/3 of the way down, let's go to the second part about saying that there's two doors. Pesach echad yeshla upasuach lakodesh. If you want to argue that there was only one entrance to the Lishkas HaGazis and it was in the Kodesh side, well, if the entrance is in the Kodesh side, then the whole room is Kodesh, even if the room protrudes external to the Mikdash area. So let's say again that my Gemara is going to be the Mikdash area. And let's say there was a room that sits at the top side of it, but the only entrance is from within the Mikdash. This way, this whole room is Kodesh. So that's what the Gemara is going to argue as to how we know that our inference from this sugya is correct. Says the Gemara as follows: Visalka daita Pesach echad yeshla upasuach, 5-6 lines above the Mishnah. Upasuach lakodesh. How could it then be that zaken yoshev b'ma'arava? If the only entrance into the Lishkas HaGazis was from a Kodesh space, the whole room is holy. How do we know? That's not, because the Mishnah writes, Halishkos habenuyos b'chol. If the physical structure, the footprint of that room is built in a non-holy place, upsucha lakodesh, but the only opening is in the Kodesh, then Tochan Kodesh. Then the whole room is assumed to be holy. If the only way to get there is from a holy place, the room has to be holy, even though the footprint of that room is external to what is otherwise the holy area. And therefore, it must be that there is more than one door. There has to be at least one door that is not Kodesh. And if you were to have assumed that there was only one door, and the door was Pasuach L'chol, and its only entrance was from a non-holy space, Pais b'mizracha, how could you then have the pious in the east? The problem there is that if the doorway is from an unholy place, Even if the footprint of the room is in a holy place, then the room is not holy. And again, we're in violation of Beveis Elokim Nahalech B'Ragesh. That room doesn't have Kedusha, and the payis can't be in a place that doesn't have the appropriate Kedusha. Elalav, Shma Minashet, Shnei Psachim Hayula. There really must have been 2 doors. Echad Pasuch B'Kodesh, V'echad Pasuch L'Chol. Therefore, there must have been 2 doors. So that's our summary so far. Machlokas Rav Sheshes Rav Nachman about what a Kohen wears during the payis, and an inconclusive argument on both parts, and then an inference from Rav Sheshes about the Lishkas HaGazis room, which was physically built in a way where half was Kodesh, half was Chol, with 2 different entrances, one from the Chol side and one from the Kodesh side. That brings us to a new Mishnah. Up until now, in this parak of Berishona, the word Berishona references the first payis. So no, it doesn't actually. It references something else. But that Mishnah only spoke about the first payis. This Mishnah moves on to the second payis. We had said that there were 4 paisos, there were 4 lotteries. Let's talk about the second one. Hapayis Hasheni, in the second lottery, what were they determining? So the Gemara says they were determining as follows. We are about 15 lines from the bottom of the page at a new Mishnah, Kaf Hei Amud Aleph. Hapayis Hasheni, what was determined? Mishochet, who's going to do the actual slaughtering? Mizorek, who does the Zrikas Adam? Mimedashen, Mizbeach Hapnimi, who's going to clean out the ash from the inner Mizbeach? Umimedashen is HaMenorah, who's going to clean out the menorah? Mimale Yivarim Lekevesh, and who's going to bring up the animal parts to the kevesh. They were put in very specific spots on the ramp. And then it's going to speak about all of these different animals, which were the Evarim Lekevesh, which animals were brought up. So the Gemara goes through a list. Harosh v'haregel, we'll see that these 2 are always connected. The head and the right leg always came together. V'shtei hayodayim, the front legs. Ha'oketz, the tail and backside of the animal. V'haregel, the left leg. V'achazeh, the chest of the animal. V'hagera, the throat animal. V'shtei defanos, the right and left flank, like the ribs, those areas. V'hakirbayim, the innards of the animal. V'hatzolas, the flour. V'achavit, and some of the other donations that were going in to the mikdash. V'hayayin. So these were all of the things that were included in that which was put on the ramp. Shlosha asar kohanim zachu bo. So the Gemara is going to be bothered. 13 kohanim. Did you do 13 lotteries? I thought we were only doing 4. That's going to be the opening question of the Gemara. And then the Mishnah somewhat cryptically adds the following at the end of the Mishnah. Amar ben Azai, lifnei Rabbi Akiva mishum Rabbi Yoshua, derech hilucho hayakarev. No, the way that this worked was that we went derech hilucho. We'll see in the Gemara what this is referring to. It has to do more with the order of which animals were brought up to the ramp at which time. The Gemara opens 7 lines from the bottom of Chaf Hei Amud Aleph with the following question. They asked the question in the Beis Medrash. Shein mefaisen la'avoda achas mefaisen, or dilma l'kol avoda ve'avoda ein mefaisen. Well, you just listed 13 avodas. Are we going to do 13 different lotteries, or are we just doing 1? Had it been that they just did 1, like the first option of the Gemara, they would have picked whatever the Kohen number 1 was, and then they would go down the line. The lottery only picked 1 person. And then the Rosh and Regel went to him. And then the next one was that they just kept going down the line. So how did it work? In that 1 lottery, were there a dozen other lotteries? Or was it really just 1 lottery? They picked 1 guy and everyone else kind of followed in suit, depending on how they were sitting in line. So the Gemara is going to present 3 possible answers. Here's the first recommended answer. Tashma, let's see from a brisa. Is it a brisa? It is a brisa. The brisa says as follows. What? Always a brisa. Whenever you have to ask a question, always a brisa. Often a tosefta. There are different sources in the Tanakh. Anyways, you don't come to Daf Yomi. I ask that question all the time because I always forget to look when I work. Often a tosefta, yeah.
Article always comes with
I know, but it's really historically not correct, and there's nafkaminas too in regards to psak. If you look in the Mesoras Hashas, it will tell you if it's a tosefta, and that was authored by Levi and Bar Kapar. They're more authoritative than brisas because they were written as part of the whole sefer. So yeah, in psak it can make a difference, but when you're learning like this, lav dafka. But
isn't this one quoting the Mishnah on Chaf Beis? It's the end of the Mishnah.
It could be that. Oh, is that what it says there?
Well, it's just saying loyal on Chaf Beis. So that was the Mishnah. That was the end of the Mishnah on Chaf Beis.
Oh, then it's not even a brisa. It's a Mishnah.
It's a Mishnah, I think. Yeah.
Even better. Thank you. Tashma, the Mishnah. This is great. We're handling in Torah. It's beautiful. Tashma. That's all. That's what you're all about. Arba paisos hayusham. So we learned in the Mishnah earlier that there were 4 paisos, and says the Gemara. If in fact you thought that each and every step had its own goings on, its own lottery, then you're going to have way more than 4. But the Mishnah said 4. The Mishnah was specific. So says the Gemara, no, the Mishnah wasn't specific, and there's another way to read it, and therefore this argument is not a good argument. I could have read that Mishnah on Chav Beis a little differently. Why does it say 4? It means that they came into the Lishkas Hazai, the Lishkas Hagazis 3 times 4 times, excuse me. And during those 4 times, they had plenty of different voting opportunities and lotteries. No problem. And any one of them, they could have had 13 or 14. That's approach number 1. So we tried from the Mishnah on Chav Beis, we rejected it. Tashma. See, this one says it's a Tosefta. You look in them, right? Tashma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo hayapayis lamachta. I'm just saying that if you look in the Soras Hashas, it says Lekaman Chavavam and Aleph Tosefta Perak Aleph Halachates.
Are we allowed to kids?
That's a good question. That was very good. They knew. Okay, anyways, let's go. They're part of the training. Says the Gemara, second possibility. Again, we're trying to answer the question of whether or not in this Mishnah, when it details out 13 different avodas as to whether or not each one was its own lottery. So we tried and failed on the first one. Let's try number 2 out of 3. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo haya pais lamachta. When it came to the person who would grab coals for the ketores, lo haya pais machta, there was no lottery for that person. Ella kohen shezacha b'ketores Omer lazeh she'imo zachai mi b'machata. We did not do a specific one for that. What does that show you? That shows you that the number 4 was very specific. And really, there was only 4 paisos. We didn't parse them out individually for each avodah. Says the Gemara, no. Maybe we should say that the machta is different. Shiny machta Torres, the chad avodah, really, it's just in all one fell swoop. It's all really one thing. And ikad amri, a slight variation on the theme, dafka machta Torres, the chad avodah. Those are all one. Aval shar avodas by pais. All of them may need another pais. So 2 different approaches as to how to learn this. Why was the machta singled out from all of the other different avodas? Machta itzrichalei. The machta was unique, and therefore it was singled out. Why? I might have thought 8 lines down, I might have thought that since it's uncommon, tuf and shin in Aramaic are interchangeable. It makes you wealthy. So therefore, niskin lapais bifnei atzma, we would have thought that this is the type of place where we wanted to put in a lottery. Kamash Malan that we don't, and it sits comfortably next to the person who's doing the ketores. Whoever's doing the ketores can hand it out to the next person, and therefore we cannot learn anything from source number 2. Let's try source number 3. Tashma, Detani Reb Chia, lo lechol avoda ve'avoda mefaisen, ela kohen shezacha betamid, shnei matar echav hakohanim nimshachen imo shmamina. This one's very clear. Reb Chia solved the problem once and for all. And Reb Chia was later than all of this authorship of, we treat him a little bit as a Tana, but as he's really in the times of the Amoraim, he was very close to the Dor HaMa'avar where things were transitioning from Tanaim to Amoraim. Nevertheless, here he's very, very clear that all they did is Ela Kohen Shezach B'Tamid. One Kohen would be the recipient of the pious of the lottery for the Korban Tamid, and then they go down the line. Okay, he's got that, you've got Kabbalah, you've got Halacha, you've got Zrika, you've got that Rosh Regel, they would go down the line. And that's how the Gemara answers our question. We gave 3 possibilities. All 3 of them, the third one is the one we accept, and we assume halacha l'maaseh that the number 4 in the Mishnah was very specific. There were only 4 lotteries. When it came to the Korban Tamid, even though it had 13 parts, we only had 1 person involved. Payis Hasheni, a quarter of the way down, Chav Hamid Beis at the 2 dots. Ibaylahu mi mekabel. Who was the one who was the mekabel of the dam? Do we say that the shochet was mekabel? The shochet is the one who does the shchita. So he's holding the shchita knife and he does his avoda. Is a shchita really an avoda? We'll discuss that in a minute. But the Gemara says that one option is that the shochet is makabel. The iyamr is zorik makabel. If the guy who's doing the zrika is going to do the kabbalah, what are we concerned about? Agav chavivuse lo makabel lekule dam. We're afraid that he's so excited to do the zrika that he's not going to collect all the blood that comes out during that first rush after the shchita, and that's a problem too. So says the Gemara, should we assume option A, that really the shochet is the one who's going to do the Kabbalah? Because since the shochet's not doing this Rika, we're not concerned that he's going to be overly excited and not do his job. His job is to shecht and collect the blood. That's option A. Oh, Dilma, or perhaps Zorek Mekabel, really Taka, the person who's going to do the Zrika, the one who's going to do the throwing, is the one who does it. The Amr Shochet Mekabel, Zimnin de Shochet Zar, because the halacha is that the shchita itself, the actual shchita of taking the knife and cutting the simanim, that can be done by a zar. That can be done by a non-kohen. Now, there may be some logistical issues with that, but technically speaking, a zar is allowed to do the shchita. So which one is it? Do we say that the person who collects the blood is the shochet, or do we say that it is the zorik? Answers the Gemara, Tashma, it must be as follows. Ben Katin is the name of a Tana. Ben Katin says as follows. Asa yud beis dad l'kiyor. he made 12 spouts, 12 spigots on the kior, that the 12 kohanim who are asukin b'tamid, the ones who were involved in the korban tamid, beautiful. He made it. It's like going to, like in the when you go to the kotel, right? When you go to the kotel and they have those sinks with like 4 little spouts on it, the round ones. So this was shaped differently, maybe mirrored after this. I don't know. Maybe it was just practical, but he was thinking practically. 12 people need the avoda. 12? Didn't we say there were 13? Says the Gemara as follows. And if you want to tell me that the shochet was the one who was going to be mekabel the dam, then sleisar have. Then Ben Katan should have made a 13th spigot. Why? Because we said that the person who does the shechita can be a zar. That means that you don't need kiddush adayim v'raglayim. So if the shochet is the one who is doing only the shechita, he doesn't need to wash his hands. How many avodas are left? 12. But if the shochet is going to also be doing this avoda of the zrika, of the Kabbalah Saddam, then Ben Katan should have made a 13th spigot, but he didn't. The fact that he made 12 shows you that the Zorek was the one who was Mekabel, because the Shochet did not do any Kiddush Adayim V'Raglayim, Elalav, Shma Mina, Zorek Mekabel, Shma Mina. Almost halfway down, Chav Hey Amud Beis. Amar le Rav Acha berei de Rabba le Rav Ashi. Afana nami tanina. We have a brisa that supports this idea. Shachat hashochet v'kibel hamekabel. Very clear. The person who's doing the shechita, stay in your lane. You do the cutting. The kibel hamekabel. The next person, he's going to do the receiving of the blood. Uba lo lizrok. And then afterwards, he's going to do the zrika shma mina. What happened to our concern that agav chavivu say that maybe? Well, okay, we assume he's going to do his avodah the right way. What happened to Kohanim's reason? That we've had so many times in shots already. We've had a dozen times Kohanim's reason. Here in this Masechta, we've seen a couple of times that the Kohanim were like in a funny emotional space here, shoving people off of ramps, stabbing people. We've seen a lot of weird things in this Masechta so far. And I don't know why we're not seeing, I'm asking on my own, I don't have an answer. I don't know why we're not seeing that the Kohanim is reasoning. The argument to say that a Kohen who was doing the Zrika was so excited to do the Zrika that he wouldn't do the Kabbalah, that's strange. The Kohanim was reading. We should assume that they would have done it the right way. Obviously, the Gemara
person who won it, and then you say you're going
it's just down the line.
Right. So that person who's just doing whatever it's next isn't going to be.
But the Kabbalah is not in the list of the Mishnah. So because the actual receiving of the blood from the shechit is not in the list, so we had to determine where does it fall, by the shochet or by the next person who's the zorek. So the Kabbalah guy is not. There is no Kabbalah guy. So that's what the Mishnah was. That's what the Gemara was struggling with. But again, I just my own question. I don't know whatever. So halfway down. Kaf Hey Amud Beis at the 2 dots. Amar Ben Azai Lifnei Rabbi Akiva. Remember, we said in our Mishnah that it follows the hilucho, the process of walking. What is that talking about? Tanu Rabbanon. The Brisa writes as follows: Keita derech hilucho. What does it mean derech hilucho? So it tells the Gemara. Here's what derech hilucho would mean: the way in which you approach the animal. Harosh veharegel, hachazeh vehageru, shtei yadayim, shtei defanos, oketz veharegel. This would be the order according to derech hilucho, the way of walking, the way that you approach the animal. First would be the rosh and the regel, the head and the right leg. Then it would be the chest, then the throat, then the 2 arms, then the flanks of the body, then the tail, and then the back left leg. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, it's derech hefsheto. It's not from the top of the body to the bottom. It's from the way that you skin the animal, and they would hang the animals upside down and skin them back to front, and therefore the list is reversed. Keita derech hefsheto, harosh veharegel. Well, it's the regel first, but the regel is always with the rosh, and then we go from the back of the end of the body to the front. Harosh veharegel, haoketz, the backside of the animal, veharegel, the left leg, and then shtei defanos, the 2 flanks of the body, shtei yadayim, the 2 front legs, hachazeh, the chest, vehagera, and then the throat. Rabbi Kiva Omer, derech nitucho hayakar, it was the way that the animal was cut, and that depends. Case that derech nitucho, slight variations in the order of these lists. Harosh veharegel, it's always going to be the head first, but the Gemara is going to ask why. The nituach is surgery in Hebrew. So nitucho is the way that we actually cut the animal, the way that it's dissected. But not dissected, butchered, whatever the word is. I'm not sure what the word is. Huh? Yeah, technically. Yeah, I think so. So what would the way that the animal was cut? How did that work? Says the Gemara. First, harosh veharegel. Again, another common theme. V'shtei yadayim. Then it's going to be the front legs, hachazeh, the chest, vehagera, then the throat, v'shtei defanos, then the flanks, ve'oketz veharegel, and then the backside, and then the back left leg. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, no. He says the way we decide where the order of the animals is derech iluyo, whichever one is the best, hayakari, whichever piece of the meat is best. So ketzad derech iluyo, which pieces of meat were the best? We always start harosh veharegel as we've seen, and then hachazeh, So the chest meat is going to be the best, v'hagera, then the throat meat was next, v'shtei adefanot, then the flanks on the sides, v'okes, then the back side of the animal, v'haregel, then the back legs, v'shtei hayodayim, the front legs were the skinniest, least interesting. But the back legs were thick. They were the most muscular of them. So that was the order of them. If you're talking about the best foods it's not necessarily the way you listed it. It should be the yerach, it should be the thigh. Yet we see that even according to the Shita of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who follows the best parts of the animal, you put the chazeh before the yerach, before the back leg. You shouldn't have done that. You should have brought the back left leg to earlier in the list. So it says the Gemara, that's talking about an animal that's very lean. But the animal that we're talking about is based on shaman, the shaman, based on how fat the animal, the fatty parts are better, marbleized meat, as we are trained to call it nowadays. And that was a little bit better. So based on how well the meat was marbled, how fat the animal was, that was the order of the list of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And then says the Gemara, Amar Rava, really, Bein Tana Didanu Bein Rabbi Yossi Basar Iluya de Basara Azlina. Really, the two Tanaim do agree that we're talking about which meat is best. The only question is Mar Azil Basar Ibra de Bisra, Mar Azil Basar Shamna de Bisra. One says we're talking about which pieces of meat were the largest, and the other is talking about which pieces of meat were the most flavorful. Now, that's a good chakira. You can go to the store, you can find a very large piece of meat, but it's not as flavorful as the other one. What are you going to buy? You're probably going to buy the more flavorful one if you're looking to have a good meal. So that's what the Gemara says. Asks the Gemara the question that we've seen as a theme, according to all the shitas, whether you go by hiluch and whether you go by hafshata and whether you go by all the different possible orders. Why was it always that the rosh was first? My time asalka regel bahade resha. Why is it that the regel was always put with the resha, with the head? The head always went first, and the back right leg always joined it. Says the Gemara, mishum the resha nefisha be'atzamos. The head was filled with bones, which was considered a bit of a kavod, but it lacked meat. So carve a regel bahadeh in order to compensate for the fact that it didn't have a lot of meat on it. It was the rosh, it was the head of the animal. We actually have a comparison a little bit out of left field, but for example, when we shower, the halacha is that we wash our head first because your head is rosh kol ha'ivarim. So on the mizbeach too, the animal, its head went on the mizbeach first, but because it was mostly bone, they added in one of the back legs, which was one of the meatiest, in order to make it more of a kavod for shamayim. Dukuli alma mias. Rosh Karev Beresha Minalan. How do we know that the head should be first, other than it being somewhat intuitive? The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Minayin the Roshu Pader Beresha. How do we know that the head and fat were first? Says I skipped a line that doesn't make sense. The Tanya, Minayin the Roshu Pader Shekodman the Cholevarim. How do we know that these two came first? Says the Gemara, Talmud Omer es Rosho ve'es Pidro ve'arach, an explicit pasuk. Okay, what about the fact that the Pader is mentioned in another pasuk? V'idach Pader Achrina, turning to the top of Chavav Amud Aleph, Lemai Asa. What was that other word of pader for? So says the Gemara L'chidetanya, to teach us the following brisa. The brisa writes, Ketzad haya ose, how is the korban brought? No se nesa pader abeis hashchita. They would take some fats, put it over the incision line where the shchita took place. Abeis hashchita ma'alei. Then they put it up on the mizbech. V'zehu derech kavod shel maila. That is the appropriate way to bring a korban. Then the next Mishnah on the top of Chavav Amud Aleph speaks about the third pious and the fourth pious. Pious Hashlishi was for the Ktoras, and they would scream out Chadashim the Ktoras Bo ve'afisu. Those of you who've never done the Ktoras before, Bo ve'afisu, you should come and you should join the lottery. We'll see in the Gemara that it was never the case that someone who had done the Ktoras once would have done the Ktoras again. Let's finish the Mishnah. The fourth pious, the fourth lottery was both with rookies and with veterans. And they added in another layer of who's going to, we said already in the second pious, of who's going to be bringing the animals up the kevesh onto the ramp, but we never discussed how we're getting them from the ramp to the mizbech. That's the fourth pious. Oh, so it says the Gemara as follows. Opens the Gemara, Chavav Amud Aleph, 6-7 lines down. Tana me olam lo shana adam ba. There was never a repetition of the person who did the Ktoras. My taima Amar Chanina mipnei shem asheres, because it's something that's of wealth, and we wanted to give the opportunity to others, so therefore we do not repeat it. This is actually one of the customs that we have by bris milah, that a sandik should not repeat being a sandik for one immediate family. So this happened by my boys. My firstborn children are twin boys. My father-in-law was on a plane. My father was the sandik for child number one. My father-in-law wasn't there. I'm like, okay, do the second one. Just sit, don't move. So my Rebbe said, no, we got to change. The Gemara says that it's just like the Torah, and you're not allowed to ever have it be done twice. Subsequently, years later, I spoke with Rabbi Reese, and he said it's a minhag, it's not a halacha, and there are scenarios where you are allowed to repeat. having a sandik, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. So says the Gemara, my time. Oh, we said it because we mashers. Amarle Rav Papa le'Abaye. Amarle Rav Papa le'Abaye. My time. Well, how do we know that it's me'asheres? Because ilema, if you want to say mishum dechsiv yasimu ketorah ve'apecha. If you want to say it's because of the psukim that speak about the Ketores, and then it says Hashem will bless your possessions, Yachi Ola Nami, by an Ola as well. By Ola as well, there are psukim that it's going to be all given up on the Mizbech, which has an implication in some way of wealth. Amar Lei, no, you can't compare an Ola to the Ketores HaShchicha, Halo Shchicha. In a regular day in a Beis HaMikdash, dozens of Korbanos Ola could have been brought, but the Ketores was only brought twice. Amar Rava, Rava says, Lo mishkacha surba merabanan demore. We're not going to find a Rav who is a posek demore who actually teaches in Paskins. Elo da'asi mishevet Levi or mishevet Yisachar. He has to either come from Shevet Levi or he has to come from the Shevet of Yisachar. Levi dichsiv yor mishpatecha leYaakov. Yisachar dichsiv Yisachar yodeh bino leitim ladas ma yasa Yisrael. We have psukim that indicate one by Levi, one by Yisachar, that they are the ones who are the teachers. Asks the Gemara, Ve'ema Yehuda Nami, we should say Yehuda as well, dichsiv Yehuda mechokeke, that they are the ones who are mechokek. They were able to dig, they were able to carve, namely they were very bright. Oker harim, says the Gemara, Asuke shmai saliba dehilchasa ka'amina. In the line that I'm telling you that all of the Rabbanim who are poskim will come from Levi or Yisachar, I'm talking about psak halacha. And by the way, according to many, this is the ideal way to learn when you have free time, is Asuke shmai saliba dehilchasa, to learn a sugya from the beginning all the way to the end, from the psukim into the mishnayos, into the gemaras, into the rishonim, and into the achronim, and into the poskim, shulchan aruch, shachtaz. That is the right way to do it until the point of actual behavior that is changed because of what you learn. Amar Rav Yochanan, halfway down Chavav Amar Aleph. Amar Rav Yochanan, ein mefaisen al tamid shel beinu harbaim alakoin shezacha b'shachar zoche bo be'arvis. We don't have a separate pious for the afternoon. Whatever happened in the morning, whoever does the tamid in the morning is the one who does the tamid in the afternoon. I asked the Gemara, that's not true. That's you just, it's an explicit Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, you misunderstood that. You thought that was about the tamid. It's not. Kitanya ahibik Torres. When it says that the Torres was done in the afternoon, that's true, but it's not talking about the tamid. The tamid was always done by the same person, always by the same pious, which was pious number 2. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Kishem Shemefaisen lo in the male, lo in the masculine, lo is talking about the tamid. The Torah is a nekeva word, but the zachar word is lo. Tanya, Kishem Shemefaisen lo shachris, the tamid, kach mefaisen lo arvis. Says the Gemara, that's a typo. It's ema lo. It should have been in the feminine, a reference to the Torah. That Brisa is not a right. There's a mistake. Tanya, Kishem Shemefaisen lo shachris, kach mefaisen lo arvis. Uchashem Shemefaisen lo shachris, kach mefaisen lo arvis. Here we see very clearly that both by the tamid, the lo in the masculine, and by the la, the ketores in the feminine, both of them, this Brisa explicitly states that there was a pious in the morning for both tamid and ketores, and in the afternoon again for tamid and ketores. So says the Gemara, that's a good question, but I have a very good answer for you. Amar of Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak Kacha b'Shabbos askinan. We're talking about Shabbos. Remember, we've learned this before, that the ashmura of any one set of kohanim would switch on Shabbos. They would switch between the tamid and ketores of the morning and the tamid and ketores of the afternoon. So they had to do another pious because it's a new group of kohanim. Because their mishmar was changing. So therefore, says the Gemara, they had to redo it. But if, according to the Havamina, it wouldn't have worked anyways because you would have had too many paisos. Says the Gemara, Maisi kulu mitzafra asu dezachi b'shachar zachi dezachi b'arvis zachi. But had it been on a regular day, so then whatever happened in the morning would have happened in the afternoon in regards to the korban tamid, and everything is clear from there. One more quick sugya, and then we'll wrap up for the night. We're toward the bottom of Chavav Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the bottom. Haravi chadashim im yeshanim. We said that by the fourth pious, what was the fourth pious all about? The fourth pious was all about taking the animals from the kevesh and putting them on the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, matnitin deloker Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Our Mishnah cannot be like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Why not? It's not. The Mishnah writes, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer Amale Varam lekevesh Shu Malo Osan lemizbeach. He says no. The fourth pious had nothing to do with that at all. The fourth pious was pre-decided. Whatever happened with the people who moved it from not on the ramp to the ramp, those are the ones who moved it from the ramp to the mizbeach. So the fourth pious wasn't used that way. So therefore, our Mishnah who says that there's a fourth pious is not like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. And says the Gemara, what's the machlokas between our Mishnah and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? Why is it that our Mishnah says that there should be a new pious, but Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov says that there should not be a new lottery for the pieces of the animal to be moved from the kevesh to the mizbeach? The Maika Miflage says the Gemara 4 lines from the bottom. Mar Savar Barovam Hadras Melech. One says it's better to use more people. That's our Mishnah, which engages more Kohanim, different Kohanim. It's better to use the principle of Barovam Hadras Melech instead of having the same 13 Kohanim. Move them in the morning. Let's have a different 13 Kohanim. Barovam Hadras Melech. We have this idea. That's why breakaway minyanim fall into this quasi halachic issue of like Barovam, unless you have a need, but like in general. Yeah. Unless you have a specific need, but otherwise you have a principle of Baravam Hadras Melech. That's the sheet of our Mishnah. However, Umar Sava, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov held Shechina Lav Orach Ara. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baravam Hadras Melech is like for human being activities, but it's not meant in the way that you think it is. Take a look at Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. Dibra Maskal Lav Orach Ara, Lemischaze Kiman de Triach Milsa. Like you're showing Hashem that it's like we have to do so much work for you. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is okay. Anyway, that's a machlokas there. Amar Rava, just one last halacha that is correct, and it's based on what we learned earlier tonight. We learned on the top of Chav Hamid Beis, just keep one finger here and look at the top of Chav Hamid Beis. We said that Rabbi Yehuda holds lo haya pious lamachta. We said that he held that there was no pious for getting the coals for the Ketores. Let's go back to where we are. It says the Gemara, Amar Rava, three lines from the bottom. Lo Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Islaid Rabbi Yehuda. It can't be that they agree with each other because Rabbi Elazar over here says that there was no pious by the getting the animals from the kevesh to the mizbeach, and Rabbi Yehuda held that there was no pious by the machta. So the problem is that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov still needs to get to the point where there's 4 paisim. So seemingly he held that the machta did require a pious. For Rabbi Yehuda, Islaid Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov din kain batru lehu paisos. If they each held of each other's shitas, that would mean that there's no pious when it came to the machta by the Torahs, and there's no pious when it comes to the kevesh, bringing from the kevesh to the mizbeach, and then vatzur lehu paisos, we're going to have too few paisos. They had to get to 4, so therefore these 2 shitas are mutually exclusive. Turning to the top of Chavav Beis, had it been that there was a Tana that ever said that there was 5, we'd also have to agree that it's impossible there will be Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Rabbi Yehuda, Huda lo Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Uda lo Rabbi Yehuda, because they only held that a maximum there would be 4. We'll stop here on Shabbos. We'll pick up on Chavav Beis. We will be learning the Chavav Beis and all of Daf Kav Zayin. I might push a little bit to the parak, and Yirtzeh Hashem will try to do that. And then Sunday night will be a drop easier. Again, a reminder that on Monday night there's going to be no shiur at all. We'll overlearn before and after. Wishing you all a beautiful night.